All right, welcome everybody, and you are tuning in today to WRULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. This is the Adam Messer Show, and I am your host, Adam Messer. And my special guest today is Margaret Coker, who is an author and a journalist. Welcome, Margaret. How are you today?
Hey, thanks for having me, Adam. All's well in sunny Savannah.
Oh, it's beautiful today, isn't it?
Of course. My goodness. Really have never expected 80-degree weather in February.
I know. I didn't expect to have to put the air conditioner on during the day and then turn it off at night.
Look, I'm standing on ceremony. My winter heating bills have been so rough.
Mm-hmm.
I live downtown in a drafty old home. So until I have to, I'm keeping that air conditioner off, trying to save some money.
There you go. Well, yeah, it's nice enough out that you don't really have to, but I just like to keep it a little cool. So,
of course.
So Margaret, thank you for being with me today on the show. And for those of you, we were actually, this is the first time we're talking. So I met Margaret through a mutual friend of ours, Susan. Oh my gosh, I'm having a brain cramp. Katrin, thank you. Oh my gosh, I don't know why I just had a brain cramp right there. But Susan and I were talking, and y'all started the it's called The Current, right? And it's a news publication, right?
That's right. Yes.
And you also have a new book out called The Spy Master of Baghdad. And so we're going to be talking about those two things today. And so would you mind giving everybody like a little brief introduction about yourself?
Oh, absolutely. So my husband and I have had our home here in Savannah for well over a decade, but each of us are journalists, and each of us have been working out of Savannah for most of that time. Mm-hmm. I worked at the Wall Street Journal and then went to the New York Times. My husband, Craig, also worked for the Wall Street Journal. And so we were overseas. We were largely in the Middle East. We've been covering the war on terror from Iraq to Afghanistan, doing all kinds of high-value political and diplomatic reporting, and we've always wanted to make Savannah our full-time home. So my first step to make that happen came in 2018 when I got a book contract that was lucrative enough for me to quit my normal newsroom day job, and I came back to Savannah to write the book in 2019. And in the time between then and now, I have been able to both finish my book, which was published and on sale as of this last week, and getting deeper into my social networks and family and friends here. I realized that it wasn't just me who really craved some more high quality public service journalism here in Savannah and across coastal Georgia. And so getting together with a group of really committed community leaders and with the help of Susan Catron, we started up this new nonprofit newsroom. And we're called The Current, like the sea current, or an electric current, if you will, because we're hoping that our journalism shakes some things up. And yeah, we're online, and we have put together a group of really high quality Georgia journalists writing about accountability journalism. So holding our elected officials to account, looking at the ways in which our government spends money and our government agencies fail us. We're looking at issues regarding racial justice and environmental justice and economic justice. And you can find us online at www.thecurrentga.org.
I think it's wonderful. I have known Susan since I started freelancing for the Savannah Morning News in 2014, and she's just a wonderful person. She's a really good editor, and I've always I don't talk to her all the time, but I reach out to her from time to time, like if I have question about journalism or writing or things like that, and she's always shot me straight. She's always steered me in the right direction, and she's such a wonderful person. And so I'm glad that she actually was like, hey, you should talk with Margaret, she has a book coming out. And because I've been kind of asking her since before y'all started, when she had just kind of announced that y'all were ready to do the current, I was like, I'd like to have you both on the radio show. And she said she was traveling today, so I thought it was so cool, and I was really glad that you, because this was kind of last minute too. I asked you if you could be on the show, and you're like, "Yep, I could do that," and it's on a Sunday afternoon. So I appreciate you carving out some time today, on your Sunday afternoon to talk about your career and your writing and your new book. And I do agree with you. I think Savannah has been kind of craving an impartial news source where they can read about these issues that are important for our community and the people in our community. So I really like the Current. I think it's a great publication that y'all are doing.
Well, thanks very much. It's a nice vote of confidence. Susan is really quite an institution. Of course, your listeners probably know her as the former executive editor of the Savannah Morning News, which she ran for over a decade. And before she came to Savannah, she was working in Columbus, Georgia, and a lot of years through the Southeast. She is a dyed-in-the-wool journalist, and both she and I have looked over the course of our career and watched how small town papers, big city papers, they've consolidated to such an extent. Family owners who used to consider the town's newspaper as part of their sort of civic obligation and civic duties to have it be a platform for community discussions about local events and local news. Those families have sold off their holdings, and now a lot of newspapers are owned by national organizations or private equity funds. And the business model for mainstream journalism these days is to create value for shareholders or value for those people who don't live in their community. And so as Susan and I looked last year, we're looking at COVID. We're looking at the ways in which our community is polarized. We saw the Ahmaud Arbery, the tragic killing in Brunswick, and we thought, we really need to use our skills to do what we got into journalism to do, which is, be public servants and inform all of our residents, not just the people that advertisers want to reach, but all of our residents with high quality news.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've noticed too with reading the articles, because I have the email subscription, but I also like to check out the stuff, is so I started freelancing in 2014, and that's my professional connection to journalism. But as a high school student, I took journalism 1 and 2, and I was on the newspaper staff. And so that was like 92, 93. And that was the only training that I had. I didn't go to college for that. I went and did my undergrad in business. I did my master's in business, and I did a master of information systems. So professionally writing, my roots went back to the things that I learned about journalism in high school, and the foundational parts of journalism in high school, and and trying to report the facts and being impartial with that form of journalism. And I think with the I'm not trying to knock anybody, and I'm not talking about anybody here. I'm just talking about in general, my opinion about the way that people consume news is more through social media and online than they do consuming the news through traditional printed papers or even going to the actual website for a news organization or whatever. And people just they see a post, or they see some kind of link or something like that, and they look for the headlines, they look for little bylines or whatever. And one of the things I enjoy about what y'all are doing with the Current is that it is more in depth. It is focused on our area and focusing on issues that are here in our area. And I feel like it's very impartial versus, and I'm not knocking anybody again, but I do see a lot of slanted journalism out there, and I don't like that. I don't like when people are I don't want you trying to influence my opinion. I want you, if you're presenting a news story, I want you to present the news story and then let me decide for myself. And I'm not talking about in a particular news station. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about like going back to like my roots with the high school stuff and journalism with that. It's like, hey, report the facts. If it's an opinion article, make sure that this is an editorial, this is an opinion. That. Not like, hey, this is our leading news story. 2 days later, oops, we got the headline wrong. We're doing a retraction. My bad. I don't like that.
Well,
So
right. I mean, the business model, again, for larger news organizations, the business model has become, they've learned how to monetize our outrage or
yeah,
or entertainment, right? I mean, we call those things sort of clickbait journalism,
right,
where you
right,
see a headline, you're like, oh yeah, I want to see 20 puppy photos that I didn't know existed, or
right, right.
yeah, I want to see celebrity scandals. And so the way that we're working at the Current is that we are completely donor funded. We're taking, all of our content is free for anybody to come online and read it. You can sign up for our newsletters. You don't have to pay us anything. But the way that we're funding our journalism is from people here in Savannah all the way through coastal Georgia who believe like us that quality journalism and quality information is a public right and not a for-profit commodity.
Yeah,
So we're not out
yeah,
to monetize your outrage. We're just there to give you the best trustworthy facts so that you can go to the voting booth and make informed decisions, or you can learn something else about your neighbors, either across the road or down the street from you. And hopefully we can improve people's lives by getting to know each other and getting to know why we're facing the problems we are right now.
yeah. And I'll say this, even though this is a newer publication, it is top notch. I mean, to me, it's one of the best publications that I've seen. As far as trying to do this sort of, I really would like to see more of this. I really would like to see this kind of model take root, and that other people start doing it around the country. And because I feel like people are so starved of actual, truthful, factual knowledge, or like I said, impartial reporting.
Right.
I mean, I really. The way I feel about it, and I don't like talking about politics on my show. I don't talk about politics on my show, but I feel like people have become so polarized that if you're not the same party faction, it's like, well, I can't agree with you. And I remember as a kid, it's like, and I look at Walter Cronkite as an example, but it just always seemed like the folks back then would report the facts, and you would kind of filter through. You could check it out on a couple different sources or whatever, and you'd read it and you kind of get this overall picture for yourself,
Right.
and today, and I go back to the social media stuff, it just seems like it's so much of a soundbite headline kind of world we live in, that people just don't care about like stuff that happened even 10 minutes ago. And
Yeah, we're so saturated with information, but
yeah,
there's no real filter to tell us anymore what's quality information,
right.
right? I mean, if you could just sort of break through some of the noise and break through some of the scandal and go behind the scenes a little bit. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
I think that's what y'all are actually doing. I mean, I really feel like you're really hitting it on the head with that, because the articles they dig deeper than just like the surface layer, and you're sharing pertinent information, and you're giving an overall picture of hey, like you were talking about with you covering political candidates or people in office and whatever. I read that article y'all did with Buddy Carter, and I was like, wow, this is pretty in depth, and it's just
right. And a lot of my family and many of my friends are Republicans, so it's not that we're coming at this from a slant. We're really just trying to go, again, sort of go in depth and behind the scenes, and have people, we're going to ask questions that we think that, we know that our readers want to hear, because they're telling us that's the kind of information they want.
yeah.
And so you're right. I mean, there was a time not so long ago when America wasn't consumed with red and blue. We were all Americans, and we didn't always get along, but we also had a set of facts that we built our society on. And so we'd like to, at the current, we'd like to be able to be that platform so that people can come to us, learn something, and then we can have discussions, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can have a renewed civic discourse,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't have to get along, but we want a better Savannah, don't we? I don't know that anybody who lives here doesn't want that. And up and down the coast, we're all tied together. This beautiful, 100 miles of seacoast that we live on, these interconnected waterways, the tidal marshes, I-95, for goodness sakes. There's a lot of ways in which that, as separate communities, we're joined at the hip. And so by bringing together, our regional similarities and our regional problems, we hope to shine a light on what's going on here.
Yeah. We've got to do the station break real quick. Margaret, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on the show with us today. Everybody, you're tuning in today to WRU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio Global Soul. Sebastian, would you mind playing a little bit for us, live music? And everybody, this is Sebastian Messer. He's my son, and he has his band, but he plays, for the first time listeners, he plays on my show every week. So here he is. Awesome. Thank you, Sebastian. I appreciate that. So yeah, Margaret, my son, he started playing guitar about almost 6 years ago now, and so he plays on my show every week. We just part of the live show. It's pretty nice.
It was beautiful.
Thank you. So let's talk about your new book that just released this week, The Spy Master of Baghdad, and I've got the page pulled up here. Do you mind if I just read it?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so the book description part, y'all. The Spy Master of Baghdad tells the dramatic yet intimate account of how a covert Iraqi intelligence unit called the Falcons came together against all odds to defeat ISIS. The Falcons, comprised of ordinary men with little conventional espionage background, infiltrated the world's most powerful terrorist organization, ultimately turning the tide of war against the terrorist group and bringing safety to millions of Iraqis and the broader world. Centered around the relationship between two brothers and Harith al-Sudani. I'm not saying that right. Harith.
That's okay. Al-Sudani.
Al-Sudani, thank you. A rudderless college dropout who was recruited to the Falcons, and his all-star younger brother, Munaf. Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Okay. And they're eponymous? Oh gosh, I'm like having a hard time here. I don't even know that word. I've never heard of that. Eponymous? How do you say that?
Yeah,
eponymous.
You're right.
Okay. Unit commander Abu Ali, the Spy Master of Baghdad, follows their emotional journey as Harith volunteers for the most dangerous mission imaginable. With piercing lyricism and thrilling prose, Coker's deeply reported account interweaves heartfelt portraits of these and other unforgettable characters as they navigate the streets of war-torn Baghdad and perform historic feats of cunning and courage. Wow. That's and this is based off of a true story?
Yep, everything in the book is true. It's I grew up in a military family, and I have always kind of enjoyed military history. We watched World War II movies when I was growing up as a kid, as a family, and I've been in the Middle East for most of the time since the 9/11 attacks, and it's really been quite extraordinary to write first drafts of history, as all these events have unfolded. But there's this real slow moving story that has happened in Iraq, which is the way in which that Iraqi intelligence units have sort of rebuilt themselves after U.S. forces went in to oust Saddam Hussein. And they are, this one unit, the Falcons that I write about, they've become one of the top U.S. counterterrorism partners in the Middle East. And, I think for anyone out there listening who likes spy tales, knows something about Cold War espionage, or, even the Mossad and all of their exploits, they'll really like, I think, this book, The Spy Master of Baghdad, because, again, you go behind the scenes. It seems to be my favorite phrase. I'll keep repeating all hour long. It take you into the Iraqi war rooms where they're plotting these really amazing counterterrorism operations, going after some of the top terrorists from Al Qaeda to the Islamic State, and then really have some deep detail with the rest of the people in the book, getting to know them and their families, because it really is sort of a tale of a band of brothers. I mean, this small elite unit that does extraordinary things. And they have to they perform lots of acts of bravery, but they're also very human. They have some really checkered relationships with their fathers. There's one guy who is sort of a screw up, who has a chance to redeem himself and earn the pride of his dad. I mean, there's a real human dimension to all of these people. They're not sort of superheroes like we see in the movies. Some of them have foibles, some of them have flaws, but at the end of the day, they're in these very extreme circumstances where you have this terrible, horrible terrorist organization, that was really a threat to their nation. These normal people sort of stood up and did extraordinary things.
I think that's amazing. I've always found the human condition the most fascinating thing. I love storytelling, and I love nonfiction work, and so it sounds like a really interesting story and group of stories put together in a book, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been, over the course of my career as a journalist, I was always asked to try and make foreign places accessible to Americans, so they could understand what was going on, but also how other people lived. And so I've written this book after spending an enormous amount of time researching and interviewing the people who are my main characters. But also, it was really important to me to write the book for people who don't normally care about Middle East politics, right? You might not have thought about Iraq for years and years, but it's such a gripping tale because, again, it is about spies. There's good guys and there's bad guys. So even if the names look hard to pronounce, and even if you don't care about Middle East politics, I hope you will give the book a try, because I've been told, and all of my reviews have been coming back, confirming this, that it is a gripping tale, and lots of drama, and so a movie and a book.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be made into a movie. That'd be great.
Yes, I'll pay off my mortgage and then my lovely Savannah home.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, that's something I really can appreciate with storytelling, and I feel like what you're talking about with journalism. That is the approach that I try to take, because I don't write hard beat stuff. I write about events, and I write about art, and I write about music, and people who write and things like that. I always try to focus the story or the article around the person, because I feel like the events come and go. You could talk about, like, oh, they're in the war room planning this thing. Okay, great. Who are the people there? And so I feel like that's the layer that, you go down into with the storytelling, where you're like, okay, these are these people, these average, ordinary people who are, called to duty, not to make a play on World War II stuff, but called to duty, and they're serving their country, trying to protect their families, just like we would, trying to do what we can to save our homes, and and when you're talking, it just reminded me. Did you ever watch Anthony Bourdain's show?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so when you're talking about showing the humanity of these folks and trying to be relatable to an American audience or whatever, I was just thinking about his show, because I used to love that show. He would connect with these people from all around the world. They'd have a meal together, they'd laugh, they'd joke, and and I feel like that's, like, we're so conditioned to see people on TV or wherever, and we don't, they're not, it's almost like they're characters in a story, but they're actually real people.
Yep, they're real people, and so it takes a while, as a foreigner, as a foreign correspondent, to get someone to sort of open up and tell you about themselves, right? I mean, that's when you get the real connections are made. It's true here in America as well. You can chit chat with your neighbors, and we do a lot of that downtown here. I live right next to Forsyth Park, and we all say hello to each other. But it takes a little bit more effort to really get beyond the chit chat and get to know what's going on inside of them and their lives.
Yeah, that made it talk.
So, right. I mean, that's what I'm most proud of. With this book. I mean, I've learned a lot of national security secrets. There's a lot of really cool things that I think that military veterans or the people who've been following politics, they're going to learn something. But
is that why there's a black SUV parked outside the studio right now?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but you're going to learn about Iraqi families, and you're going to realize a little bit more about what they do to get through the day. What it looks like to sit down for a meal, and how people shop. I mean, all the basic things that we all do, even though we live in different countries.
Oh yeah, one of the things I love is about storytelling is I feel like that is one of the universal things that we all connect on, is a good story. I don't care where you're from, people are naturally storytelling beings, and I think that's so important, because you have to earn that trust with folks for them to, because people are gonna, like you said, they're gonna be cordial or whatever. Or my son was talking about his friend is from, where's your friend from? Michigan? Minnesota. And his friend was saying that that the folks that he's met from the West Coast, that they're not as friendly, but they'll tell you something to help you out. And he said that the people that he's met in the South, that they're more friendly, but they're not so apt to help you out. And did I have it backwards? Oh, it was the backwards. He said the West Coast folks were I had it backwards. Sorry.
It's like they're nice but not kind.
Oh, okay.
And then it's kind but not nice in the South.
I was like, and we were laughing about like how some people will say "bless your heart" and they don't really mean that's something nice. They're just saying "bless your heart" because they're like, oh, poor, you don't get it. So I don't know. It's just
that is true. There's definitely a politeness about the South, but I tell you what, there's no other place I'd rather be broken down.
I know.
On the
I
road
love it.
Either.
I love it. I think that's one of the things too. Is like once you get to know people, you have a better sense of like, okay, well, not so much that you're an outsider, but when you're part of that community and people see that you're invested in that community and you're not just there to get a story or whatever. When they, that old teacher saying that they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
That's a good saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a teacher saying that's been around forever. I mean, it's true. People really don't care what you know if they know that you don't care about them. They'll start listening to you when they figure out like, oh well, they got my best interest at heart. So
right. Right. Yeah. Well, and of all of my time in and out of Iraq since 2003, I have to say that Iraqis are definitely like that as well. There's definitely a Southern hospitality that they imbibe. Their people are friendly on the street. There's smiles, and when they invite you inside your home, my goodness, you're going to eat until the cows come home. You'll get, they'll make sure you get everything you ever wanted and more. So the hospitality that I've been shown there over the years, and the real, I think the respect that I had as someone who was out to tell unusual stories and important stories. I mean, really, you just can't say enough about the generosity of the Iraqi people.
Mm-hmm. We've got to do the station break, and we'll be right back.
Yes, it is that time again to support WRUU through your vote in the Connect Savannah Best of Savannah poll. It's easy. Go to Connect Savannah at www.connectsavannah.com and click on the Go Vote image. Read the instructions and then scroll down and click on the image labeled Media. Type in WRUU in both the Best Local Radio Station and Best Talk Radio Station categories and click the Vote button for each. Thank you for listening to and supporting WRUU in the Connect Savannah Best of Savannah poll. America's Second Harvest of Coastal Georgia and McCraney Property Company are sponsoring a free drive-through food distribution at Memorial Stadium, 101 John J. Scott Drive, Savannah, on Saturday, March 6th from 8 a.m. until 10 a.m. or until the food runs out, to provide a week's worth of fresh food to feed over 1,000 families in need. Those wishing to attend should enter via Skidaway Road southbound and right onto Eisenberg Drive. Again, that is a free drive-through food distribution at Memorial Stadium, 101 John J. Scott Drive, Savannah, on Saturday, March 6th from 8 a.m. until 10 a.m. or until the food runs out.
All right, we are back, everybody, and this is the Adam Messer Show. I'm your host, Adam Messer, with my special guest, Margaret Coker, who is a journalist and an author, and we've been talking about The Current, which is a Savannah-based news publication focusing on community events and politics and things that are applicable and important to Savannah. And we've also been talking about her new book, The Spy Master of Baghdad, which is a book about a group called the Falcons and how these soldiers came together and their stories about what they did to help with the cause and fighting against anti-terrorism. When I was a kid, Margaret, my parents were friends with a couple of an Iraqi couple, a husband and wife, and they met them at university, and they were actually refugees from Iraq in the 80s.
Wow.
Yeah, and so we would go, when you're talking about the food and all that, we would go over to their house or they would come over to our house, and that was that was such a wonderful time. Like when I was a kid, we would go, and that was the first time I ever had like stuffed olive leaves, which today are like one of my favorites. And just their culture, just learning about their culture was so neat. Now, not an expert, okay? I'm definitely not an expert, but it was just interesting to me to see how they did things differently, and and they were very, very family oriented. They were really good people. When they came here, they wanted, they wanted to be American. It's like they had their Iraqi traditions, but they also wanted to very much be American. And so I just thought it was kind of cool that you were over there in Iraq, and like you said, they're like, you're going to eat until you can't eat, and then you're going to eat some more.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's my grandmother's my Southern grandmother, she and all of her sisters, we'd mostly spend Thanksgiving with them,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be it'd be kind of the, everyone would take a turn, all the sisters. When my grandmother would be the hostess, and then the sisters were supposed to just bring a side dish, but they all wanted to outdo each other, right?
Oh,
so every
yeah.
single year, you'd have 4 complete Thanksgiving meals served to you, and you had to try everything so you didn't hurt anybody's feelings. That's an Iraqi family dinner. That's what you get, 4 complete meals in one.
Mm-hmm.
But how fascinating, how lucky for you that you had that exposure as a kid to different cultures. Again, that's kind of, when we all get to know each other
mm-hmm.
in our own living rooms, all of the politics kind of melts away. Again, you don't have to agree about everything, but you realize that we're all human. We should all be treated with respect and dignity. And then we can figure out ways to make life better together.
Yeah, I actually, it's crazy because I saw something the other day. It was a person, they're kind of doing like a report, but they had this digital version of the globe, and It had these little, and I actually saw it on TikTok. All right. But this person was doing like a report about a comparison of U.S. military bases compared to like the rest of the world.
Okay.
And it had like these little light indicators on different parts of the globe in the map, and they went in and out. And they were talking about like the United States has over 800 bases around the world, and some of them are kind of like Fort Stewart or Hunter, where they're their own encapsulated little city,
Right.
And I was thinking, and they were talking about like the next largest ones are like the UK and France, and but in comparison, like China has 1 base compared to like we have 800, and we very much become like a world police force almost, right? And I think it's interesting because I don't know. I've always had this like dichotomy, like we're the heroes, but then at the same time, sometimes like we're the ones going in and saying, "Hey, we're going to take your oil," type thing. You know what I mean? And so I think it's interesting, like with the Spy Master thing, like how, and I haven't read the book, but how the folks they're fighting for their own liberty and working with the U.S. soldiers. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, look, most of the places where on that map that you've just referenced, I mean, most of the places where there's a U.S. presence, if not, I mean, I think all of the places where there's a U.S. military presence, we're there at the invitation of the foreign government, right? And so there's a lot of reasons that other countries, the advantages that they see in having a partnership and a relationship with the U.S. military and the U.S. government, it should be going both ways, right? I mean, we put our soldiers, our servicemen and women abroad because it's in our national interest, and hopefully that national interest aligns with the other folks, right? And that's where we get into problems when those interests do not align. But again, I come from a military family, so I have a very sympathetic, I think perception and view about the role that the U.S. military does play in overseas conflicts. The fact is that when the Americans entered World War II, we helped our allies defeat the Nazis. We helped defeat the Japanese. We were seen for so long as a force for good and progress around the world. And that takes money, that takes commitment, that takes, a worldview in Washington, D.C., that those international partnerships are good for us and our nation. Obviously, this has become a very controversial stance in the last several years because there's a real debate about who those international partnerships are good for. Are they good for multinational corporations and the CEOs? Are they good for American workers?
Right.
I know you don't want to talk about politics, so we won't go down that road too far.
No. Yeah, I'm just saying, like with that, I was just finding it fascinating that they have like 800 bases, and the staggering number of differences. Because I grew up in the 80s, and like the era of the Cold War, where they're like, hey, get a textbook, go out in the hallway, put it over your head, and it'll protect you from nuclear fallout. And like,
Yep.
And I grew up like that song, I was alive and I waited and I saw it, like when the Berlin Wall came down. I mean, I remember that. And as a kid growing up, military family, I'm not, my dad was, he was in the Army, I had two grandparents, two grandpas that were in the World War II, grand uncles and stuff that were in, so all that. And I'm a huge supporter of like what we do, and how we are around the world. So I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that sometimes it just seems like, like we're in areas and it's like, well, we've been at war for how long? Out of the whole time we've been, country, 245 years almost. How many years have we been at war versus how many years have we been at peace? When I was a kid, I remember in ninth grade when the Iraqi war started, we were watching it live on TV. And it was like, they said that our generation was the first generation that had gone, like, kind of grown up through adolescence and childhood, coming into teenage years, that they weren't in some sort of conflict, right? Mm-hmm. And so it just makes me think, like, what we're doing, it's like, we wouldn't be there if the people didn't want us there, right? Sometimes I look at it like, okay, well, we're there because it's more affordable for the countries that they don't have that infrastructure. I mean, like in Iraq, the people that were fighting against Saddam and the military, they didn't have infrastructure. They didn't have a way to they didn't have tanks and guns and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, and I think there's definitely an obligation by the U.S. government. If you're going in and you're toppling a government, you need to help put one back up, right? Mm-hmm. You need to help put a new one in its place. You buy it if you break it, that sort of thing.
Well, like at Germany and Japan. I mean, those are two great examples of, what an effective, I guess, reconstruction or whatever.
Yeah. There's, and so I think, again, if your listeners want to go out and buy Spy Master of Baghdad or find it in the library, I hope that one of the lessons they'll take away, in addition to being entertained, is that America has had a very strong partner there in Iraq. Mm-hmm. It's not just chaos and destruction. There's actually the Iraqis have been doing us a good turn. There are the top echelons of the Islamic State and Al Qaeda. They were in Iraq, and Iraqis actually helped find them, track them, and bring them down. Mm-hmm. And so that makes America safer.
We have some friends here in Savannah from Afghanistan that the husband was an interpreter, and he came to the U.S. After I guess his service with them, and I feel like especially with Savannah being a military town, we have a great I don't want to say hodgepodge, but we have a great collective of different people from around the world. And so I think I kind of, the point I guess I'm making is like, we have such a huge military force and we have such an influence around the world that I guess people get like the idea of like Hollywood, right? My wife is from Mexico City, and so her family are all like, well, why aren't you rich or why aren't you this? It's like, that's Hollywood, so if all they ever see is like us in that capacity, when you're talking about having a dinner or a meal with somebody and like that's the connection, I feel like that's where you really get to the story, when you're sitting down and you're talking to these folks, one-on-one. It's not hey, all I see is the U.S. soldier, or all I see is the Hollywood, movie star, or all I hear is like the pop star. When you sit down and you see those folks and you talk with them one-on-one, you're like, oh, wait a minute, we might have cultural differences, but really we're people at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I have to say that, in our last year of sheltering in place, I've been spending a whole lot of time on Netflix, mm-hmm. looking at lots of different series from other countries, mm-hmm. just so you get this like more sort of in-depth view about what things are like, and not just the glitzy Hollywood thrillers or their version of the Hollywood thrillers, but family dramas, you can actually see what's going on.
My wife's been watching some kind of Egyptian story. I think it's like a soap opera. It's some kind of drama. But it comes out and it's Egyptian, and then like somebody is putting them on a website or something like that where they do like their own, I guess dubs. Not dubs. What is the subs where they write is Is it dubs? Which one is
I
it?
think it's they dubbed it.
They dub it?
Yeah, into like Spanish or something.
Spanish. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's an Egyptian show that she's been watching. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so crazy.
Yeah, there's the Middle East has a pretty vibrant entertainment network. You know, the Egyptians do, the Turks do as well, and for cultures that love a soap opera, they do get dubbed into different languages. So
I've been getting into Bollywood
Brazilians
stuff.
and Mexicans. Do you or don't? It's a little bit beyond me.
Oh, I love it. They have such cool little action flicks and stuff. And then I love oh my gosh, I love like Korean stuff too. There's this one Train to Busan, I think it's called. Oh my gosh, that is such a good horror movie. Yeah. So hold that thought for a second, Margaret, if you would. We're gonna do the station ID. Everybody, you're listening today to WRU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul, and here is Sebastian Messer. Awesome. That was great. Thank you so much, Sebastian. That was great. So, yeah, Margaret, I really appreciate that. Because I feel like when what you're doing with your book, obviously it's, you had a book deal and all that, and that's great. I mean, that's one of the things that my friends and I talk about. It's like, we want to publish our books, and, because I publish books and I write books and stuff. And I feel like it's so important, especially if you're doing, historical nonfiction or whatever, or if you're doing like a biography about somebody, or this kind of story, that you get it right. You're not trying to sensationalize it. You're not trying to, obviously you want to put, you're going to put some stuff in there. It's like, well, a little bit more of a human interest, not just like, they were at this meeting, blah, blah, blah. And then, fact 2, fact 3, you got to make it, palatable for people to read. Right.
Right.
But that's
right. That's the skill as a writer, right? You know how to craft your sentences to make them to pull people in, but that doesn't mean that you make up the facts, right? So those are the two. They're two different skills. Some reporters have both of them. Some reporters only have one skill, and we've as you were saying earlier in our discussion, folks have, because they're consuming their news via social media, they all of those old kind of dividing lines have disappeared. Is it opinion? Is it entertainment? Is it opinion or is it fact? Is it journalism or just something else? And so, yeah, it's important for people to support people to read and figure out what the sources of the information that they're consuming are. But when it's a book, you've got more time to really flesh out stories and people's lives and lots of background, which helps readers understand context. So yeah, it's definitely not a headline. There's a whole lot of context in my book.
Yeah, that's something I really appreciate. With any kind of story, because one of the things I really like are audiobooks, and. Yeah, is this going to be available on audiobook as well, or is it available already as audiobook?
It is.
Okay.
It is on an audiobook, and my publisher is HarperCollins. They wanted a professional audiobook narrator to do the audiobook, so it's not my voice. But you can find the Kindle or the audiobook version online, just like you can the book.
Nice.
Yeah, our local Savannah treasure, E. Shavers, is stocking the book. So if folks if folks want to go online and download the audio version, please do. If you want to buy it in print, go support Jessica at eShavers. It's one of the great things that I love about Savannah, is having a local independent bookstore just downtown, where we can all go learn new things.
Yeah, they're like I think 3 blocks up the road from us. So
cool.
Yeah, right there on the corner of Bull. They're a great little bookstore. So we have a few minutes left, Margaret, and what would you suggest, like, for not just folks wanting to read the book, but also with their consuming news and that kind of thing? What would you like to see more of with that for folks?
Well, everybody knows my conflict of interest here. Of course, my first thing I'm going to say is that everyone should come read The Current. Come to our website, www.thecurrentga, all one word, .com. And I think that that people who care about news and current events, you should definitely be aware that the platforms that you're reading your news, whether it's on your phone, whether it's on Facebook, whether you get your news just through an app, you should remember that technology companies are monetizing your habits and your news consumption. Mm-hmm. And the way that they monetize that is make your habits attractive, or to package your habits to advertisers so everybody can make money off of what you do. And that, from that point of view, they're feeding you more stories that you already have consumed instead of opening your horizons to different points of view or different sources of news, or even different types of news. So that's something that we all, as citizens of this great land, should understand. Democracy is not a spectator sport. We need to put some of our own time and effort into figuring out the motivation for news organizations to give us, to feed us whatever it is that they're feeding us. And we should also remember that just like in the free market, we should all look for different forms of news to consume, and that way we have a wider point of view and more trustworthy facts in order to make up our own minds.
I feel like that's a really important statement too. Being able to, and I don't feel like you have to go to college to have an education, so I'm just putting that caveat out there, okay? Because I hear that from people a lot. I do have my education. One of the things that they teach you when you're doing academic research is that you should be able to verify the sources, right? And
sure.
They should be if it's something that is out there, there's probably going to be multiple sources on the same thing. And so if you're reading, if you're reading just from one area, or if you're just reading from one point of view, or I'm not trying to knock anybody, but like back in the day when I was a kid, we used to watch wrestling, right? Mm-hmm. And we all knew that wrestling was, not, I'm not saying it's fake. I'm not saying it's fake, because those folks were, well, here's the thing. It was predetermined, but those hits were real. Okay.
Okay.
No, all right.
They weren't faking the hits.
They weren't faking the hits. They weren't faking throwing somebody out in the ring or anything like that. But we all knew who's going to, like, if it was predetermined who was going to win or whatever. It was entertainment, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But there was a point in time where people used to think that, it was just like, it was not predetermined, right? And then when it came out, it was like, okay, well, this is entertainment. So, like, I like edutainment. I like where it's educational and entertainment at the same time. But when it comes to news, I don't want somebody's opinion or editorial unless I already know that it's an opinion or editorial at the top of the byline. I don't want to see an article that's presented as, or any kind of news story presented as a news story, and it's slanted, or it's, gotcha journalism or biased journalism or whatever you want to call it. Keep that for the editorials. Keep that for the opinions. If you're reporting on the news, report the news. And that's what I would like to see more of. It's like, okay, well, instead of trying to sell people's, purchasing habits or their digital, persona to advertisers based off of their, traveling habits and all these other things that they track us on, big data tracks us on, I would like to see more of impartial journalism that presents, here's the story, or where, like with y'all, with and I'm gonna say I'm biased here because I really do like your publication. I am a friend of Susan Catron's, and I like her, and I've just met you, but I like you too, and I am a fan of that. So I like the style that you're using. It reminds me of more of traditional style journalism where it's like, hey, you decide on what this is. And if we're going to give you an opinion and we're going to put it as an editorial, we're going to say this is an editorial. This is our opinion. But
let me cut in real quick and say that at the Current, we actually have no opinion. I mean, we do not run opinion pieces. We do not run essays. We do not run editorial. So everything is in-depth reported news.
There you go.
And that way, you don't even have to. There's no way to be confused because we just don't have the other stuff. We just have the good stuff, the fact stuff.
That's what I like. Yeah. That's what I like. So anyway, well, thank you very much, Margaret, for being on the show today as a special guest. I really appreciate it. Can you let folks know one more time where people can find information out about your new work, The Current, and the Spy Masters of Baghdad?
Yeah, absolutely. So The Current is the nonprofit news organization that we're running that serves Savannah and coastal Georgia. So you can find us at www.thecurrentga, all one word, .org, because we're a nonprofit. And then you can find out more about me and my book by going to my author page, which is my full name. It's margaretcoker.com or the Spymaster of Baghdad.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with me today, Margaret. I really appreciate it.
Hey, it's a pleasure.
All right, everybody, stay tuned because up next we have the Savannah at Night, you guys, Bill Cooper and the gang, and I'm sure they've got an awesome show lined up like they do every week. So thank you very much.